Tinkering in Washington delayed our emergence from the Great Depression. Created too much uncertainty. Well, we see some of that playing out here again. This hubris, as the Greeks called it, that people in Washington, people from afar, can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. This is a complex economy. We just need to create the guardrails where private sector decisions and investments can take place, and then set freedom-loving, intelligent individuals off to make a better life for themselves and their family. Yes, sir?
First, Mr. Young, thanks for coming today to IUS. I appreciate your endeavors, because I'm sure there's a lot of trials and tribulations your way. My name is Dean Carter. I'm a lifelong Floyd County resident. And basically, my question is this. Should the Republicans take the vast majority of the seats available in November, I predict that the Democrats will try to railroad through everything they can do in the next 2 months after that. And we already know, if you're aware, H.R. 1388, I believe, is the bill that's already been passed, mandatory volunteerism and things like that. What would you do to help your fellow Republicans maybe reverse or undo any damage that the Democrats will try to do?
Sure. Well, let's talk about some of the damage that will precede the election. We have this health care legislation, perhaps some of the worst legislation that we've seen in decades, really the history of this country. And I'll be part of an effort to defund the worst provisions of that legislation to ultimately push my fellow members to try and enact genuine free market health care reform that brings down the cost of health insurance so that private individuals can go out and afford insurance for themselves, their families, their businesses. We don't have that right now. We actually have something that bends the cost curve upward. And when we embarked on this health care reform, the primary purpose, we were sold this idea during the presidential debates, the primary purpose was to try and bring down the cost of health insurance so it could be more affordable, and this fails on those grounds. So it's an absolute tragedy that we spent all this time and all this money, and we end up with something so miserable. I will also work to, should something like a European-style value-added tax be proposed after the election here, I'll do everything I can to ensure that's never passed or defeated, should it be passed in a lame duck session. For those that haven't heard much about this, the value-added tax is really sort of a hidden tax that we see throughout much of Europe. And Nancy Pelosi uttered something about it, I believe, months ago, that might be a way to address our deficit problems. Ladies and gentlemen, taxes should be an absolute last resort. There's a difference between my opponent and myself. He first goes to raise taxes to try and balance the budget. It's an absolute last resort in my book. Before you ask somebody to take another dollar out of their pocket that they, through exercising their freedom, have helped create, you need to be able to look them in the eye and say, I have done absolutely everything I can to avoid asking you to do this. And that's why the value-added tax I find so offensive. There are other reasons as well, but those are a couple of pieces of legislation that I've been hearing about that we will need to reverse early in the next Congress. There may be others that you have concerns about that you want to bring up. Thanks for your question. Yes?
Have you heard about the 1% tax they want to put on all financial transactions? Like if you write a check, there's a 1% tax. If you transfer money, there's a 1% tax. If you have a stock transaction, there's a 1% tax. Just on all kinds of financial transactions, they want to put a 1% tax on.
I have heard some discussion of additional transaction taxes, was the question, to try and raise more revenue for all the spending we've just been responsible for. And once again, I go back to standing against more taxes. We need to be able to look to people and say, look, we did everything we can to restore fiscal responsibility. In my book, that means getting back to some moderation of our spending, right? Now, the transactions tax actually was a component of the cap and trade, national energy tax. Because, remember these things called carbon credits? Right, you would try and invest in carbon credits to comply. It becomes a very complicated scheme here, but to comply with this cap and trade energy tax. And as you traded these carbon credits, folks on Wall Street would make a healthy profit. And there was some discussion of maybe taxing those trades of carbon credits. Another revenue attempt.
Todd, I had a question about earmarks. I know Representative Boehner is working now to try and put something in writing that the Republicans would support. And I'd like just to ask you to take a pledge that I don't think that any Republican, House or Senate, should take $1 on an earmark, even though it's nice to come back in the community. All those things should be on the paper for everybody to see, and who's voting and where the money's going. And if you are fortunate enough to be here, would you support doing away with earmarks completely across the board?
The question was about earmarking and ways to reform it, and what my approach is going to be. And ladies and gentlemen, we have seen such excesses regarding earmarks in recent years. I brought up one earlier, and we could spend some time talking about the water-free, $1 million water-free urinal initiative, or the National Peanut Festival grants, or mariachi music grants, or these things are ridiculous. Actually, all the things I just mentioned were actual expenditures using your hard-earned money. I want to be part of the solution here, and a couple of years back, I created this fiscal responsibility group. It was really a platform for me to go around and talk about some of these issues, some of the longer-term economic challenges we have, and our earmarking excesses. The name of the group was the National Organization for People Against Irresponsible Government Spending. Now, you think of the acronym there, it's No Pigs. And I go around and I would cite some of these earmarks. And one of my points with respect to earmarks is that, okay, compared to our liabilities as a country or the size of our economy, yeah, earmarks don't constitute tons of money compared to that, but they undermine trust. I mean, if you can't trust your member of Congress not to spend $1 million on a water-free urinal initiative, how are you going to trust them on all manner of other issues? So that's why I think earmarking, aside from the fact that it's just wasteful and offensive, needs to be addressed. Now, there are a number of proposals out there. Republicans in past Congresses have called for a one-year, if I recall, a one-year moratorium on earmarks. Just take a time out so we can figure out how to reform this system so that we can all live with it, come up with some compromise. And, you know, go figure, Congress couldn't even do that. They wouldn't even take a time out to figure out how to reform it. So I like that timeout idea. I would hope that as Republican candidates and first-time candidates, maybe not even Republican, like myself, have been campaigning on this new era of responsible leadership, that early next Congress we can say, look, we're going to take that time out and we're going to figure out exactly what we can do in a bipartisan way to reform this. Now, Congressman Jeff Flake has all sorts of earmark reform amendments, many of them designed to increase transparency, and I would sign on to most of those amendments, absolutely. But I want to be part of the solution here. Maybe the answer is to say no earmarks whatsoever, to build up some more trust. Longer term, I have some real issues, though, with all of you sending your tax dollars to Washington and everyone feeding at the trough, and we get nothing for our investment, which is a point our governor has made recently as he accepted certain dollars coming back. So that's a balancing act. But for a period of time, at least, I will be pushing for that timeout approach to ensure that, you know, look, we do everything we can to try and reform it. It was a long answer, sir, but hey, I'm running for Congress, and this is kind of what we do. Yes?
If the Republicans take over the House, will they be able to repeal the Medicare benefits, you know, get them back? change the way, because I know that